Hey folks, tonight's story is about something that once swept across the world without permission. No war drums, no king's decree, just a silence that came before the coughing, a flicker of fever behind the eyes, a sickness that knocked on your door and never asked who you were. Tonight we're traveling back to a world held together by prayers, herbs and sheer will. The time of the plague. Not the comfortable kind of plague you learn about in textbooks. The medieval kind. The kind with rats and rot and real fear. If slow, calm storytelling helps you unwind, feel free to like the video or subscribe, but only if it actually helps you sleep better at night. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how many people are falling asleep to the same strange corner of history. So dim the lights, let the room go quiet, and imagine waking up in a place where every cough might be your last. It starts with a sound you've heard 1,000 times before. A cough. Just a dry little thing. You hear it in the morning before the sun's high. Maybe it's your neighbour. Maybe your sister. Maybe you. You don't think much of it, not yet. It's the season for bad air anyway. The fields are damp. The firewood's still green. People cough in the morning. You fetch water, feed the chickens, patch a hole in the roof with a bit of old thatch you've already used twice before. By noon you've forgotten the sound, but by evening someone else is coughing. Not loud, not constant, but there's a rhythm to it now, like footsteps you can't quite place. Like something walking just behind you. Nobody says the word, not yet. That would make it real. Instead, people say things like, just a chill, or he always gets that way. This time of year, they mention the fog, blame the wind, complain about the well water, and everyone agrees, even though none of it feels right. There's a tightness in your chest that isn't a cough. It's a question. You go to sleep like always under scratchy wool beside people who snore, who mutter in their sleep, who wake once or twice to add wood to the fire. The coughing doesn't stop during the night. It just moves from one house to another, from one dream to the next. The next day, someone stays in bed. They say they're just tired. They've been working too hard. Everyone nods. You nod too, but you also keep your distance. Just a little, just in case. That evening you notice the goats won't go near the corner of the barn. The dog won't eat. The cat stays on the roof. The animals always know first. You tell yourself not to worry, but you tie a little herb bundle anyway, just for luck. 2 more days. 3, and the cough is still there. No louder, but it lingers. A woman sends her son to the woods for extra sage. A man starts sleeping in the shed. A boy tells you his mother won't let him touch his sister anymore. No one laughs. You start hearing old stories, quiet ones told when the children are asleep, about a village that vanished, about a family found still in their beds, eyes open, about a cart left in the road, its oxen still tied. No driver in sight. You've heard these stories before. Of course, everyone has. But they always belong to somewhere else. Someplace far away. Someplace worse. Not here. The baker's wife stops selling bread, says she's not feeling well. You don't ask questions. You just take your loaf from the second basket, the one she leaves by the door, and you nod at her window without looking up. You don't tell anyone that your sister coughed 3 times this morning. You don't tell her either. You just stir the stew longer. Add a pinch of salt you can't afford, and pray that it will be enough. The prayers change too. They get longer, tighter. You find yourself saying them twice, then again, under your breath. Then again before you open a door. Then again when someone sneezes. No one calls the priest. He's too old, too frail. Besides, he stopped answering his door yesterday. You saw someone knock and wait holding a chicken. They waited a long time. Then they left the chicken and walked away. The chicken is still there. It hasn't moved. The sky feels heavier now. It hangs lower. Even the birds seem quieter. You don't know if it's your imagination or if the air is really changing. But it smells different, like smoke and earth, and something else you can't name. You keep working. That's the only thing that helps. You pull weeds, fix the fence, stir the soup, mend a sleeve, anything to keep your hands moving. Because when you stop, the silence catches up, and in that silence you hear it, the cough. Still there, still soft, still patient. By now you're not pretending it isn't happening. You just don't want to say it out loud because names have power, and once you name something you have to face it, so you keep working, keep praying, keep listening. And every night as you lie down beneath a roof that leaks in all the wrong places, you wonder if it comes for you. Will it come quietly? Or will it knock you close your eyes? Pull the blanket higher and try not to cough. It's not the things you notice that are the real danger. It's the ones you don't. You've heard that before from a shepherd once years ago, when a wolf took one of his lambs and no one saw it happen. It's always the quiet ones, he said, the ones that sneak in, not the ones that howl. Now that phrase stays with you, because the danger here doesn't howl. It doesn't break through doors or burn fields. It doesn't come with banners or soldiers or sermons. It comes on the backs of things too small to see, in shadows, in silence, in the breath between sentences. You don't know the word bacteria. You've never heard of a flea bite causing death. What you do know is that people get sick and you don't always know why. Sometimes it's the air, sometimes the water, sometimes it's sin, sometimes it's just bad luck, and sometimes it's something that doesn't have a name. You start noticing patterns that the coughing starts after someone new visits, that families who live near the road seem to fall first, that the man who handles the grain sacks is always the first to look pale. You wonder if sickness can cling to wool, if it can sleep in your boots, if it can nest in the beams above your bed. Some say the rats are to blame, but there have always been rats. They're part of life here. You see them in the stable near the grain bins under the floorboards. You chase them off with sticks and curses, but they don't run far and they never leave. You start to think the rats are watching you, like they know something you don't. The stories keep spreading faster than the cough. Whole towns gone, fields left untended, priests dead, monasteries abandoned. A bishop drowned himself in a well to avoid the plague. A nun locked herself in a bell tower and hasn't come down. She rings the bell every night at sunset. They say it's the only sound left in her village. You try not to listen to these stories, but they find you anyway. In whispers over stew, in muttered warnings by the well, in the way someone clutches their necklace just a little tighter when they walk past a neighbour's door. You do what you can. Everyone does. Bundles of herbs are hung above every entrance now. Lavender, rosemary, rue. You wear a scrap of cloth soaked in vinegar tied around your mouth. It smells sharp and bitter, but it feels like armour. Some start carrying charms, bits of bone, pieces of wood with crosses carved in them, a ring made from a melted coin. You don't know if it helps, but it gives your hands something to hold when they start to shake. The herbalist, an old woman with more scars than teeth, says you must burn sage daily and sleep with garlic under your pillow. That sickness can smell fear, and if it doesn't smell garlic first, it will come for your throat. You try not to laugh, But then your brother says garlic worked for vampires, and suddenly it doesn't feel funny anymore. You haven't touched another person in days. Not properly. Not a hug. Not a handshake. You pass things across tables. Nod instead of speaking. You keep space even inside the cottage which isn't built for space. You sleep with your back to the wall, wrapped in every cloth you own, even though it's warm outside. The silence grows heavier. You can't see fear, but you can feel it in the way people open doors, slowly speak in half whispers, breathe shallow through their nose. Like trying to hide your breath might hide you too. You try not to cough, even when your throat itches, even when the smoke stings your lungs. Because if you cough even once, everyone will look at you differently. You'll look at yourself differently. The fire burns lower than usual. Wood is harder to come by now. No one wants to walk the forest paths alone. No one wants to be out of sight for too long. There are rules you start to follow without anyone saying them aloud. Don't touch. Don't stay too long. Don't ask questions if the door doesn't open. Don't ask where someone's gone. Don't ask who dug that hole near the fence line. And most of all, don't think you're safe. The danger is quiet. It wears your clothes. It eats your food. It kisses your children on the forehead at night and tucks them in. Then in the morning it takes them. It's not what you see that gets you. It's what you don't. You go to bed with that thought. Every night folded in your blanket like a prayer, and you sleep with one ear open, listening for footsteps. Or worse, the sound of nothing at all. There's a moment, a single quiet moment, when you look at someone you've known all your life and realize you don't recognize their body anymore. It doesn't happen suddenly. That would be easier. No, it's a slow unraveling, a shift in color, a sheen of sweat that doesn't go away even when the wind picks up. The way someone's voice changes when they say they're just tired. The way their hands shake when they try to lift a spoon. You notice first in the boy next door, he's always been lean, always running. You've seen him carry more firewood than anyone else. But today he sits on a stool and won't meet your eyes. His neck is wet, his skin pale and tight like it's trying to hold something in. Then the lump appears. It starts under his arm, just a swelling at first. Red and warm, the mother says it's nothing, maybe a splinter, maybe a bee sting, but it grows fast. By nightfall, it's the size of an apple. By morning, it's black around the edges. No one talks about it, not directly, but you hear the word bubo for the first time in years. It slips out like a curse, like a confession. No one says it twice. Soon he can't walk. His mouth is dry. His breath comes fast. His eyes look in your direction, but don't seem to find you. He speaks nonsense, whispers the names of saints, then asks if the bread is burning when there is no bread. And the smell. That's the worst part. You don't want to speak of it because it feels like a betrayal. But the air near him is sharp now. Sour. His sweat smells like iron and rot. You cover your nose with your sleeve, then you feel guilty, then you do it again. You remember the stories now, the ones you pushed aside, the swelling, the fever, the darkening of the fingertips, the bruises that bloom like ink beneath the skin, as if the body is sinking from the inside out. You hope it's just him, but it's not. Within days you hear that others are sick. A girl in the next hut, the washerwoman, the man who fixes cartwheels. The illness doesn't choose. It doesn't care how clean your house is or how often you pray. It doesn't care if you're kind or cruel or young or old, and the signs are always the same. Swelling under the arms, then the groin, then the neck. Skin that reddens, then blackens. A pulse that races like a frightened horse. A thirst that can't be quenched. A tongue that swells until speech becomes impossible. Then the bleeding starts. Not all at once. A nosebleed that doesn't stop. black flecks in the spit, streaks of red in the cloth pressed to someone's chest. People stop speaking aloud about the symptoms. They start using gestures instead. A hand to the side of the neck, a quick shake of the head, a look that says, "You know what this means." You check your body every night now. You feel under your arms. You run your fingers along your throat. You press against your stomach, trying to decide if the pain you feel is real or imagined. You try to believe it's just a cold, just a fever, just a sore muscle from chopping wood. You drink more broth. You burn more herbs. You sleep facing the door as if that might make a difference. Some begin to isolate themselves entirely. You see doors barred from the inside, windows shuttered even in daylight. A family disappears for 3 days. Then a cousin knocks to say their chimney hasn't smoked since Friday. You start to understand the fear, not just of dying, but of dying like that. Alone, sweating and shaking in the corner of your own home while the world forgets you. And still the coughing continues. It's always in the background, a sound you can't scrub from your ears. Some are dry and sharp, like wood splitting. Others are wet thick as if the lungs are trying to drown. At night you dream of the lumps. You dream your own fingers turn black. You dream of someone holding your wrist and shaking their head slowly, silently, the way they did for the boy next door. The worst part is knowing that your body is no longer just yours. It could betray you at any moment. You've always lived with hunger, with pain, with cold, but never with this kind of uncertainty. You wake up each morning, and the first thing you do is listen to your chest, to your throat, to your own breath. Still steady, still clear. Then you move one arm, then the other. Then you stretch your neck. Feel for heat. Feel for pain. Your body is a riddle now. One you solve every day. One you fear might change its answer by nightfall. You don't know how long you can keep this up, but you do. Because the body changes, and so must you. There was a time when someone would come, when illness meant a knock on the door, a priest with a candle, a healer with herbs, a neighbor with broth, a prayer said over your hands, your forehead, your chest, a blessing drawn in ash across the lintel of your home. That time is gone now. The doors stay shut. The priest hasn't left the chapel in days. Some say he's sick. Others say he's hiding. You passed by once and thought you saw a shadow move behind the stained glass. But you didn't knock. No one does anymore. Even the steward is gone. Rode off last week, they say. Left behind an empty hall and a locked grain store. The Lord left before that, horses saddled before dawn. No one waved. No one expected a return. The village feels leaderless, unguarded. Like a ship with its sail in tatters, and the rudder missing. A child died yesterday. No one came to carry the body. His mother did it herself. Wrapped him in his winter cloak, the one with the rabbit fur lining, carried him on her back like she used to when he was smaller. She didn't say a word, just walked through the field to the edge of the trees where the soil is soft. She came back alone, didn't speak, didn't weep, just sat by the hearth and stirred a pot that never boiled. You were there when someone knocked at the healer's door. It was an old man, face grey, legs shaking. His daughter was sick. He said he didn't know what to do. He kept his distance, spoke through a scarf. The healer never opened her door. She slid a bag of herbs through the gap near the hinge, told him to boil them with sage and say a prayer to Saint Sebastian. He asked if that would be enough. She didn't answer. He left the same way he came, slowly alone. The chapel bell hasn't rung since last Sunday. That was when they rang it for 3 deaths in a single morning. After that, it was decided no more bells. Not because people stopped dying, but because the sound became too much, too constant, too close. It started to feel like a countdown. Even the animals sense the change. The dogs are restless. The chickens don't lay. You haven't seen the cats in days. Maybe they've gone feral. Maybe they've learned to stay away from people. There's no one to write names down. No one to keep records. The steward used to carry a wax tablet. Write down how much barley was owed, who had paid their taxes, who had lost a cow, who had buried a child. Now there's no list, no count, no confirmation that anything ever happened. A man who once made coffins has stopped entirely. He says there's no more wood, but you suspect it's something else. A man can only carve so many boxes before the shape haunts his sleep, so people bury their dead in silence, in whatever they have wrapped in blankets, in straw, in old clothes that no longer fit. There's no procession, no hymns, just the sound of soil being moved, sometimes with a shovel, sometimes with bare hands. You ask yourself what help would even look like now. A doctor. There are no doctors here, only rumours of them in cities far away. Some say they wear long robes and masks shaped like birds. Others say they bleed people until their skin turns white, then call it mercy. You've never seen one. You don't expect to. The only thing that visits you now is fear and silence and sometimes mercy, but not in the way you hoped. People begin to pretend they say things like he's resting when someone hasn't moved in a day, or she's just sleeping deeply when her skin is too cold. They leave food by doors that never open, water by beds that no one rises from. Sometimes the help you offer is simply pretending with someone for one more day that everything is going to be all right. Because the truth is too much. Because you know in your bones, in the worn soles of your shoes, in the hush that settled over every path and doorway, no one is coming. The world outside has turned its face away, and all you have left is each other. It begins with the smoke, not the usual kind, not the warm, sweet scent of firewood burning low in the hearth, or the damp curl of straw catching flame. This smoke is different, sharper, thicker. It smells like panic disguised as preparation, like hope that's starting to burn down to ash. Someone says it's the air, that the sickness comes on the wind, that it rides invisible currents slipping in through open shutters and keyholes, wrapping itself around your neck while you sleep. So people start burning things, not just wood but herbs, bundles of rosemary tied with twine, sage, rue lavender, if you're lucky. Anything that smells like it might drive something away. They say it wards off the miasma, the bad air, that if you breathe in enough of the good smoke, the bad one can't find you. And so the village starts to smell like an apothecary gone mad. Every house has its own ritual. Some people hang dried flowers over the doorway. Others stuff herbs into the rafters. A few soak cloth in vinegar and press it over their faces, walking through the lanes like ghosts. You try not to laugh. Then you try not to cough. Some folks carry little pouches around their necks. Amulets, sachets filled with whatever they think might help. Crushed mint, bits of garlic, a saint's name written on parchment folded 7 times and stitched into the lining of a cloak. The smell becomes a constant. It clings to your clothes, to your hands, to the walls. It curls under doors and lingers in the folds of the blankets. At first it's comforting, a sign that someone is trying, that there's still effort, that there's still belief. But over time it grows stronger, denser, almost sour, like too many herbs steeped too long in fear. And underneath it all, the other smells begin to creep in. The sour tang of sweat that doesn't dry, the faint rot of linen soaked and hung too late, the sharp edge of iron like rust or blood. The animal stink of fever. The sweet wrong scent of something dying slowly behind a wall. You light more fires, sometimes just to cover it up. You see your neighbor pour oil over a pile of sage and set it aflame in a bowl. She says it will cleanse the air, that the saints like the smell of sage. You wonder what they think of the smell of burning. Some try stronger measures. A man rubs vinegar behind his ears. A woman covers her children in ashes. One family places a bowl of onions in every corner of the room and prays in shifts. You start to notice who stops burning things. Not because they've lost faith, but because they no longer have the strength. Smoke stops rising from certain chimneys. That's when you know to stop asking questions. You remember your grandmother used to say that, where there's smoke, there's life. But now it's the opposite. Now when you smell nothing, when the air is still and empty, that's when you feel the true danger, the absence of effort, the stillness of surrender. There are moments when you think the village might disappear entirely beneath its own smoke, that one day you'll wake up and everything will be a blur of white and grey, the trees, the fields, the cottages, all hidden behind a curtain of scented haze. You wonder if that would be better, to not see it coming, but you keep burning, because it's all you can do. You hang more herbs. You boil garlic in a pot until the walls reek. You wave bundles of dried thyme through the rooms like a priest with a censer. You tell yourself it's working. You tell yourself that as long as the smoke rises, you are still here, still fighting, still breathing. And even if it doesn't help, at least the sickness will know it's not welcome. You've never spent so much time near others and felt so far away. Before the sickness, the village was woven from closeness, from shared bowls and borrowed tools and conversations, shouted from open windows. Children ran in packs. Doors were left open. Meals stretched across thresholds. Now silence sits between you. You pass people in the lane if you still go outside at all. And the nods are shorter. The glances briefer. People pull their scarves higher. Wrap shawls tighter. Step back without needing to be asked. No one offers a hand anymore, not to help, not even to steady someone who's fallen. The space between bodies has become a kind of boundary. A fence made not from wood but from fear. But you're not alone. Not really inside your small home, if you're lucky enough to still have everyone. The room is never empty. There's your sister who hasn't left her mattress in 2 days. Your uncle who sharpens a knife over and over. Not because he needs to, but because the sound keeps him calm. The baby who cries less now, and somehow that's worse. You all breathe the same air, share the same smoke, eat the same stew. You don't speak much. There isn't much to say. No one wants to be the first to admit they're afraid. And if someone does, they do it quietly. In the way they stir a pot longer than necessary, or the way they stop singing when the cough starts next door. You don't talk about the numbers anymore. Who's fallen ill? Who's vanished? The tallies only grow, and saying them aloud feels like inviting them into your own home. So instead you speak in small things, the colour of the sky, whether the soup burned, if the chicken's laid. You build your days out of scraps of normal stitching together, hours from anything that doesn't taste like dread. You make work out of routine, sweep the floor twice, rearrange the firewood, comb your hair even if no one sees it, wash clothes in cold water and hang them by the window, even though they'll dry stiff and sour. These acts are small, but they are yours. Little declarations of order in a world where everything else has unraveled. Sometimes there are laughs. Tiny ones. Strange ones. Not the kind you used to hear after a harvest feast or from a group of children chasing geese, but short, dry bursts. A cough that almost turns into a joke. A comment about the stew tasting like nothing and something all at once. Laughter that feels like relief and guilt in equal measure. And sometimes there is singing. Not often. Just a verse. Maybe two. Sung softly while stirring a pot or while rocking the baby. Something old, half-remembered. You don't always know the words, but the sound still helps. Nighttime is the worst. The walls feel thinner. The quiet is louder. You hear everything, the rustle of someone turning over in bed, the drip from the cracked roof, the muffled cough 2 houses down. It makes sleep feel like something borrowed, something that could be taken away at any second. But somehow, despite it all, you sleep, you wake, you cook, you sweep, you sit beside the fire with people who are still here and try not to think about who isn't. And in this strange new world where you can't hold your friends or visit your neighbours or light a candle in the chapel, you begin to understand what it means to be alone together. No one speaks it aloud, but you all feel the same thing, that you are threads in the same cloth, stretched fraying but still holding on to each other, if only by the thinnest seams. You don't know what tomorrow brings. But tonight there is warmth in the hearth. There is breath in the room. There is stew enough for everyone, and that is enough for now. There comes a point when you start thinking about leaving. Not seriously, not at first, just in the way someone stares at a far hill and wonders what's on the other side. Just a thought, a flicker, something quiet that stirs in your chest when the coughing gets louder, or the silence gets too deep. What if you could go? You think about the woods. You've known them your whole life, the edge of them anyway. But inside they're thick and strange, the paths twist. The air feels older, the birds don't always sing, and when they do, the sound doesn't comfort. You've heard stories of things in there that don't like to be seen. Still you wonder. Maybe there's another village, a place untouched. A place where the air smells like pine, not smoke, where the bread is still warm in the morning and no one hides behind shutters, where people talk in full sentences again. You know it's probably not real, but you let the thought stay, just a little longer each night. You imagine walking, packing up what little you have, some bread, a bit of salted root, a knife, your grandfather's scarf, maybe a bundle of herbs, just in case the bad air follows. You'd leave before dawn when the mist still hugs the earth and the trees haven't fully woken. But then what? The forest is wide. The rivers are deep. There are bandits out there. You've heard that your whole life. Men with nothing left to lose. Or worse, men who still think they have something to take. And even if you made it to a town, what then? You don't have coin. You don't know the dialects. You can't read the signs. You're a stranger with a cough and a patchy bag of roots. Would they take you in? Would they even let you stay the night? Probably not. Probably they'd slam the gate before you even reach the wall. Still the dream persists. You picture the road stretching out in front of you, quiet and golden in the morning sun. You picture walking until your legs give out and still seeing nothing but trees. You picture being alone, not just socially distant, but truly alone, without even footsteps nearby. And suddenly the dream feels colder. Loneliness is heavy in the hand. It makes your breath short, your heart louder. You think of your sister still wrapped in a blanket back home, of the dog that won't eat unless you feed him, of the way your neighbour still leaves a little bowl of broth on your doorstep every third day, even though she hasn't seen your face in 2 weeks. You realise leaving isn't escape, it's disappearance. The dream fades just a little. You make your tea. You fold the same cloth again. You mend the hole in the hem of your sleeve, even though no one will see it. You do the things that keep your hands busy and your feet here. And still sometimes in the dark, when sleep doesn't come quickly enough, You let yourself walk the road in your mind. You pass trees you've never seen, streams you'll never cross. You imagine a breeze that doesn't carry smoke, a sky that doesn't feel so heavy. You know you'll never go. But sometimes, just sometimes, the dream is enough. It holds you through one more night. And when the morning comes, you rise again. Not because you've escaped, but because you stayed. Because staying in times like this is its own kind of courage. At first, you try to eat like you always have. You stir the stew, you tear the bread, you count out the onions and the leeks, and you tell yourself there's still enough. The pot simmers. The herbs hang over the fire, and you pretend the air doesn't smell like panic. But the food begins to change. Subtly at first, a little thinner, fewer roots, a smaller pinch of salt. You notice it in the broth, the way it leans more toward water than flavor, the way the spoon hits the bottom of the pot a little sooner. And the bread. It doesn't rise like it used to. You stretch the flour with things you wouldn't have considered before. Ground up peas, cracked oats, bark, boiled and scraped. You chew more, swallow slower, pretend not to notice how your jaw aches. You tell yourself it's fine, that you're just tired, that your appetite is small, that you've never been picky. But soon meals stop feeling like comfort. They become something else. A ration, a calculation, a whispered question passed from hand to hand. How much is left? Not allowed. Not always, but it hangs in the air with the steam and the silence. You start looking for things you never thought of as food. Nettles, dandelion, roots, tree buds. You soak them, mash them, add whatever herbs you still have. And when it still doesn't taste like anything, you add more heat, more salt, more time. There's a moment you remember it clearly when someone brings back a squirrel. It's small, scrawny. But you don't ask questions. You clean it, boil it, add turnip greens. You eat the stew with both hands wrapped around the bowl and try not to think about how close your fingers are to the bone. Later that week you find a rat. You don't scream. You don't hesitate. You thank God. You cook it alone quietly, eat it with your back to the door. You don't tell your family. You feel ashamed and grateful and still hungry all at once. That's what meals become now. Something between prayer and survival. You chew slower, you talk less. You watch the pot as it boils, not with hunger, but with hope. You hope it lasts. You hope no one else gets sick. You hope the taste stays with you just long enough to fall asleep. Sometimes someone brings something back from the woods. Mushrooms. A handful of berries. A bird caught in a net meant for rabbits. The whole house gathers without gathering. No one says it aloud, but everyone watches the pot more closely. The portions are smaller now. You ladle carefully. Count pieces. Give more to the weakest. Less to the ones who say, "I'm not that hungry." Even if they are. And there's still gratitude. That's the strange part. Even in hunger, there's a kind of thanks. That the fire still burns. That the pot still has something to offer. That no one has gone to bed empty, not yet. The plates don't clatter anymore. The spoons don't scrape. Everyone eats with a kind of reverence, as if noise might offend whatever fragile spirit is letting them eat tonight. You remember how meals used to be. Laughter, arguments, crumbs on the table, and someone stealing the last piece of bread. You don't talk about that now. It would sound like boasting. Now a meal is an offering, a quiet promise that for this 1 hour the world hasn't ended. And when you finish, you place the bowl back by the hearth. You fold the cloth. You wipe your mouth and don't ask if there's more. There's always enough even when there isn't. There was a time when the church answered everything. When crops failed, you lit a candle. When a child fell ill, you brought a scrap of cloth to be blessed. When storms cracked open the sky, you crossed yourself and whispered the name of a saint. You didn't always understand the answers, but they were there in the rhythms of fasting and feasting, in the tolling of bells, in the quiet nod of the priest as he passed through the village. But now the chapel doors stay shut. You still walk past them sometimes, out of habit, out of hope. The steps are the same. Your hand still touches the doorframe. Your eyes still drift to the tiny stained glass window with the figure of Saint Sebastian pierced and calm. But the door doesn't open. Not anymore. The priest hasn't been seen in days. Some say he's praying. Others say he's sick. A few say he left in the night. You don't know which is true. Maybe all of them are. The candles have gone out inside the chapel. If you press your ear to the wall, you might hear movement. A cough, a prayer, a soft scraping. Or maybe it's just the sound of the wind caught between the stones. You light your own candle, even if it's just a stub. You set it on the windowsill. It flickers in the breeze. You whisper your prayer aloud, but softer than usual, just in case something is still listening. But the air stays quiet. The holy water has dried up. The altar cloth is stiff with soot. The bread hasn't been blessed in weeks. You kneel on the cold earth outside the chapel and try to remember the words to a hymn. You get halfway through before your voice catches in your throat. Not from sadness, just from dust. You still make the sign of the cross before meals. You still mutter thanks after waking. But the movements feel different now. Like you're going through a dance with no music. Like calling out into a room you know is empty, and yet you can't stop because belief is stitched too deeply into the fabric of your life. You don't pray for miracles anymore, just for comfort, just for routine, just to feel that something might still be holding the world together. The saints still hang on the wall above the hearth, their faces faded, scratched corners peeling. You find yourself talking to them sometimes, not asking for anything, just talking. Like you would to an old friend you know can't visit anymore. One day a boy asks you why the priest doesn't come anymore. You don't have an answer. You tell him the priest is resting. You tell him saints are very busy during times like this. You tell him maybe God is listening more quietly now, like someone leaning close so you don't have to shout. He nods. He lights his own candle that night. It doesn't last long, but he stares at it like it's telling him a story. That night you dream of bells. The old kind, slow measured. You hear them echo through a clean sky and across fields filled with wheat. And for a moment you believe you're back in another season, another life. But when you wake, there is no sound, no bells, no chanting, no footsteps outside the chapel door, just the wind and the quiet ache of still believing in something that no longer speaks. It's always the mornings that tell you someone is gone. The nights are quiet, slow, stretched thin, like old thread. You fall asleep to the sound of breathing, sometimes shallow, sometimes sharp, sometimes coming from too many directions to tell who is still awake. You lie still, trying not to cough, trying not to listen too hard. But when the morning comes and someone doesn't stir, that's when you know it's not dramatic. No gasping. No last words. Just stillness. A shape that doesn't shift under the blanket. A bowl that stays untouched. A silence that doesn't fill. And then comes the question. No one asks out loud. What do we do now? There's no one to carry the body. No priest to say the words. No coffin to place them in. You wrap them in what you have. A shawl. A sheet. The same blanket they've slept under since last winter. You try not to look at their face too long. You lift them carefully. Or if you can't, you ask your neighbour. They won't speak. They'll just nod. And together you carry the weight outside. Not heavy. Not anymore. You walk past houses that pretend not to see, not out of cruelty, out of mercy, and you dig. Sometimes the earth is soft. Other times it fights you, frozen, stubborn. You don't always dig deep. There isn't time. There isn't strength. You do what you can. You place them gently. You place a stone or a ribbon or a prayer whispered into your sleeve. Then you go home and scrub your hands in cold water that smells of iron. You don't talk about it later. You eat your meal and say you're tired. You sweep the floor. You fold the same cloth again and again. And the rest of the house pretends not to notice how quiet the room has become. Some don't even wait until morning. They vanish in the night. You wake to find the door open. The blanket folded, the herbs by the bed undisturbed. They left quietly, some to walk into the forest, others to sit beside the chapel or under the old oak near the well. They go to meet the end on their own terms and no one follows. Not because they don't care, because they do. Because following someone into that silence feels like stealing from them. You tell yourself that maybe they just needed air, that they'll come back, that you'll see them by evening carrying mushrooms or branches or a strange new hope. But you don't, and the next day someone else is missing. You keep count even if you try not to, a mental ledger you carry like a stone in your gut. This family has lost 2. That house is empty. The cottage by the stream hasn't lit a fire in a week. The grief doesn't scream. It doesn't weep. It sits, quiet, heavy. A weight pressed into every step you take. Sometimes you think you're used to it, that the ache has dulled, that the hole has stopped growing. Then someone coughs, or someone doesn't wake, or someone folds their blanket a little too carefully and walks into the fog. And you remember that you are not used to this, that you never will be, but you still rise the next day. You still light the fire. You still make the stew, even if there's one less bowl to fill because someone else is still here, and because in this world disappearing is easy, but staying takes everything. When someone falls ill now, no one says it out loud. You speak in half sentences, in glances, in the way a hand lingers too long over a forehead or a pot of broth is left by the door instead of brought inside. You don't say, she's sick. You say, she's tired today. You don't say, he's got the fever. You say he's resting. Naming it gives it power. So instead you build rituals. Small ones, quiet ones. Ways to keep the sickness at bay or to make peace with its arrival. You hang garlic above the door, not because it works though. Some say it does, but because your grandmother did, and her grandmother before her. You don't question it, you just do it. You place a knife under the sick person's bed blade facing outward. To cut the illness out, they say, or to frighten it off. You're not sure who first said it, but now no one sleeps without steel nearby. You boil herbs in water and make them breathe the steam. Sage. Thyme. Whatever's left. You drape wet cloth over their forehead and whisper names of saints you barely remember. Saint Roche for plague. Saint Sebastian for protection. Saint Barbara for a good death. You don't know if the saints are listening, but you speak their names anyway. You tie red thread around the wrist. You sprinkle salt in the corners of the room. You draw small crosses in ash on the inside of the windows where no one can see. You rub vinegar onto the soles of feet. You hang a holy medal around a child's neck, though the string has frayed and the medal itself is more rust than silver. The air inside a sick room is different, heavier still. It smells like sweat and herbs and quiet desperation. You walk softer, speak less. Even the dog doesn't bark. Sometimes someone reads aloud, not scripture but stories. Bits of fable. Old tales passed from one hearth to another. Stories about foxes who trick kings and women who turn into birds. You don't know if the sick hear them, but the rhythm helps. It reminds everyone that there is still something outside this moment. You don't sing, not anymore, but once in a while a voice will hum low and shaky, something tuneless and sad. It hovers above the bed like smoke, and then it's gone. When someone is close to the end, the rituals shift. You open a window, even if it's cold, to let the soul out. Or maybe to let something else in peace, comfort, relief. You light a candle, place it near their hands. You dampen a cloth and wipe their face even if they can't feel it. You speak softly, not in hope of an answer, just to fill the space. You might be alone when it happens. No one wants to die in front of others. It feels too personal, too raw. So even when the room is full, there's a kind of distance, a space between breath and silence that you don't dare cross. When they go, you don't cry right away. You close their eyes. You cross their arms. You take the red thread from their wrist and tie it around a door latch. Just for a day. Just to let the house know someone has gone. You cover the mirror if you have one. You sweep the floor in one direction only. You hang rosemary above the threshold and whisper a name into the rafters. Not so it echoes, just so it's heard. Then the room is cleaned, slowly, carefully, ash scraped, water changed, the herbs burned down to nothing, the cloths boiled or buried, the knife is put away, the salt is brushed out the door, and when you're done you sit, you breathe. You say nothing because some rituals don't ask for words, just presence, just care, just the quiet strength it takes to keep tending the sick, knowing that each time might be the last, and doing it anyway. You used to think the danger was out there, beyond the hills, beyond the woods, in the distant cities with their towers and crowds and noise. The places people spoke of in half wonder, half warning. You imagined the sickness as something far away, something that belonged to travelers, to strangers, to those who lived differently. But now it's here, and somehow the world outside feels even worse. Word travels slower these days, but not slow enough. A peddler passed through last week, or maybe the week before, pulling a cart that rattled more than it rolled. He didn't stop to sell, just shouted a warning and kept moving. Said there were whole streets in the city where no one breathes anymore. Said the rats are bold and the bells ring all night. You haven't heard a bell in your village for weeks. In towns they say the dead are stacked like wood and the grave diggers are blindfolded. That priests speak blessings from windows. That doors are marked with red paint or crossed boards. Or signs that say nothing but don't. There are laws now passed by voices you'll never hear telling people to stay inside, to burn their clothes, to bury their kin before dawn. No markets, no gatherings, no weddings, no baptisms, no last rites. The church doors are locked there too. You picture cobbled streets now slick with ash, bread lines that end in silence. A child left at a doorstep swaddled in prayers and hope. A city that once rang with bells, now silent, but for the wheels of carts and the sound of weeping behind shutters. They say the rich have fled to their country houses, taken their servants, their stores, their silver, left behind stone halls echoing with nothing. They'll return when the air clears, if it clears. Until then, the city belongs to fear. You wonder if the world is ending or just changing. There are rumours of cures in the cities, always in the cities. A man who breathes through a sponge soaked in rosewater. A woman who eats only garlic and never falls ill. A doctor with a mask shaped like a bird who holds a stick and never touches anyone. But even the doctor wears gloves. Even the doctor doesn't stay. You realize slowly that escape isn't possible, that wherever people breathe, the sickness follows, that running doesn't save you. It just carries fear from one place to another. You've seen it in the eyes of a stranger at the edge of the forest. The way they asked for water but didn't step closer. The way they looked at you like you were a fire. They couldn't warm their hands at. You didn't give them water. You didn't give them anything. And still you think about them. Sometimes at night you imagine them walking toward the city. Dust on their clothes. Silence all around. A city with high walls and locked gates. Guards who don't open doors anymore. Priests who shout prayers from rooftops and call it kindness. You try not to envy them, but part of you wonders if it's better to disappear among thousands, to vanish into the hush of a crowd, than to watch your world grow smaller by the day. Here in your village, you know every face that vanishes, every name, every gap at the table. Out there you might be anonymous, but you might also be alone. And worse, you might be invisible, so you stay. Not because it's safer, but because it's yours. Because here, even in grief, even in silence, even in dread, you are seen. You are remembered. Out there the world is wider. But that doesn't mean it's better. At first they did. When it all began, the children still cried the way children do, when they scraped a knee, when supper was late, when the dog barked too loudly, or the wind knocked open a shutter in the middle of the night. But not anymore. Now they sit still. Their games have grown quiet. The dolls are tucked into their corners. The carved wooden animals lie untouched in the straw. Even the smallest ones have learned how to wait. It's not because someone told them to, it's because they watch. They watch how you listen for coughs that don't belong. They see how your hands tremble slightly when someone doesn't come to the door. They hear the change in your voice when you say someone's name and then don't say it again. They watch and they understand in the way that children do not, with facts but with feeling. You try to shield them, of course. You speak in gentle riddles, you say. He's gone to the forest for a while, or she's resting at the chapel. You don't use words like fever or death. You tuck the truth beneath warm blankets and hope they'll fall asleep before they notice the lie. But they know. They always know. You see it in the way they cling to each other now. Older children pulling younger ones close. When the fire burns low, a girl brushing ash from her brother's cheek with a tenderness far beyond her years. A boy handing over his last crust of bread without being asked. There are no tantrums now, no slammed doors, no angry tears. The outbursts that once seemed endless have disappeared into the silence between days. And that silence feels heavier when it comes from a child. You remember how it used to be. Muddy hands, loud songs, endless questions. Laughter so sudden and sharp it startled the crows from the trees. Now when a child laughs, it's soft, hesitant, like they're checking to see if it's still allowed. Sometimes one will ask, when will it be over? You never know what to say. You talk about spring, about better weather, about the feast days coming soon. You say it like a story, not a promise, because promises feel too sharp in the mouth now, too fragile, but you keep telling them anyway. You keep feeding them first, keep bundling them in blankets that smell like rosemary and smoke. You hum the old lullabies, even if your voice breaks. You place little bits of sweetness in their bowls, a shred of honeyed root, a slice of apple dried last summer. You give them stories when there's nothing else to give. Tales about animals who outwit giants, girls who turn into stars, boys who ride on the backs of wolves and always find their way home. You don't believe them anymore, but the children do. And that's enough. Sometimes they draw pictures in the dust. A house with a smoking chimney. A mother with flowers in her hair. a field with rows of wheat stretching toward a bright sun. They don't show them to you. They just draw them, then wipe them away before nightfall, as if even hope has to be hidden now. One evening you find a girl sitting by the hearth, rocking nothing in her arms, just air. You ask her what she's doing and she says, "Shh, he's sleeping," and you know she means her brother, the one you haven't seen in 3 days. You sit beside her. You say nothing, because what could you say? There are no tears, not from her, not from you, just the crackle of the fire and the sound of a lullaby with no words. You tell yourself you'd survive, that you'd be one of the strong ones, that you'd adapt, that your knowledge, your medicines, your modern instincts, all of that would keep you afloat. That you'd know how to stay safe, how to stay clean, how to stay calm. But you wouldn't. Not here. Not for a day. Not in a world where the air itself feels heavy. Where the sun rises. Not with hope, but with a kind of warning. Where every breath is a question and every answer is silence. You wouldn't know what to do when someone coughed beside you and everyone in the room stopped breathing at once. You wouldn't know how to ration food when there's no more flour, no more salt, no more anything. Just broth made from bark and onion peel and whatever hope hasn't spoiled yet. You wouldn't last without sleep. Not the kind you're used to. Soft and safe behind doors that lock and heaters that hum. Here you sleep next to people who might not wake. You wake to find someone has disappeared. And then you go on like they didn't because you have to. You wouldn't know how to carry the dead. You wouldn't know how to wash their faces and wrap their limbs and whisper the names they didn't get to hear one last time. You wouldn't know how to hold a child and tell them stories. When your voice is raw and your throat tight and your hands haven't stopped shaking since the fire went out yesterday. You wouldn't know how to live without answers, without news, without numbers, just the rhythm of the fire, the weight of water in a bucket, the hush of a room full of people trying not to cry too loud. Because this world doesn't care what you know. It doesn't care how fast you can type, how many books you've read, how often you check the news or wash your hands. It cares how long you can carry grief without letting it drag you down. How long you can act normal with fear perched quietly in your lap. It cares how steady your hands are when they tremble anyway. Here. Survival isn't dramatic. It's not about skill or speed or strength. It's about staying. About stitching one quiet day to the next until you forget how long it's been since someone knocked on the door with good news. It's about mending the same patch on the same shirt 3 times because there's nothing else to wear. About whispering prayers you no longer believe in because your voice is the only thing holding the dark back some nights. It's about lighting a candle and pretending it's for a saint when really it's for you. You wouldn't last. Not because you're weak, but because this world asks for something different. A kind of strength that doesn't roar, that doesn't shine, that doesn't win anything, just endures. The kind that gets up in the morning knowing full well it might be the worst day yet, and still makes tea, still stirs the soup, still straightens the blanket of someone who might not make it through the night. You wouldn't last, but that's okay, because no one here does not alone. The ones who make it do so quietly, side by side, without glory, without songs, just hands and patience and the will to keep walking through a world that's falling down around them. And if you did find a way to stay, it wouldn't be because of anything you brought with you. It would be because someone shared their last piece of bread, because someone passed you a cloth soaked in vinegar, because someone told you a story when the air was too thick to breathe. It would be because somehow someone still believed you were worth saving, even when the world didn't. You don't remember when surviving became the only goal. There was a time when life held more festivals, songs, hopes for spring planting, dreams for next year's harvest, names carved into wood above door frames, children learning the steps to old dances, feet thudding against packed earth like drums calling down the stars. Now all of that is gone, or maybe not gone, just buried, like seeds under frost waiting. You rise each day, not because the sun brings warmth, but because staying in bed feels too much like surrender. You stir the ashes. You light the fire again. You say a small prayer, even though the words feel hollow in your mouth. Sometimes that's all endurance is. The willingness to begin again, even when you've forgotten why. The world around you is quieter now. Not peaceful. Not really, but stripped bare. The bells don't ring. The bread doesn't rise. The chapel stays locked, but the people, the few still here remain. There's something holy in their repetition. The woman who still braids her hair each morning even though no one sees it. The old man who sweeps the path to a house that no longer has a door. The boy who sings to the goats even though only one is left and she's stopped producing milk. No one calls it brave. No one writes songs about it. But these are the gestures that hold the world together. Endurance isn't loud. It's not speeches or swords or banners flapping in the wind. It's soft and slow. It's folding the same blanket again, scraping the same pot again, holding the same hand even when it shakes. Especially when it shakes. Sometimes someone laughs, and for a moment it feels like sunlight cracked through storm clouds. It startles you. You blink. You forget the wait for just one breath. Then you smile too, and the moment passes and you carry on. You don't ask for more, you just let the moment live and die like everything else now. You keep track of the seasons not by feasts or markets, but by the way the wind changes, by the way the chickens molt, by how long it takes the clothes to dry. Your calendar is a string of small shifts. You measure time in the gaps between grief, and yet somehow you're still here. Not because you've overcome the unthinkable, but because you've learned how to live inside it. You've learned the sounds of a house that still breathes even after loss. The language of looks passed over stewed vegetables. The shape of silence shared between people who remember the same name. You've learned how to endure when joy feels dangerous, when rest feels stolen, when hope feels like a flame too small to protect. You don't call it strength. You don't call it anything. You just do it. You get up. You feed the fire. You hold someone's hand when the coughing won't stop. You stay. And in staying, you resist the pull to disappear. This too is defiance, not the kind that shouts or shakes walls, but the kind that kneels to pick up the broken, that sings when the throat is dry, that offers one last piece of bread when you've already had less than enough. They won't write your name in books. There will be no statues. But the smoke that rises from your chimney, the lullabies hummed in dark rooms, the stew passed from one bowl to another, they matter, you matter. Because endurance is not the absence of fear. It's walking forward anyway, and though no one will ever know how much it cost you, you carry the weight quietly, steadily, fully. You carry it through the silence, through the smoke, through the dark, and somehow impossibly into another day.